And now, because he has to leave to go to another meeting, so I'm going to ask the NYCHA Capital Program Director, Doug McNevin, to speak to you, and he will talk about NYCHA flood mitigation and resiliency efforts.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman. My name is Doug McNevin. I'm the Director of Capital Projects work in my day job, the Bronx and Queens developments that the Housing Authority owns, but for the rest of the time for the Hurricane Sandy restoration efforts that the Housing Authority is doing. And just let me I'll be brief, but I just want to give a little background on the Housing Authority. New York City Housing Authority owns 334 developments in the 5 boroughs of New York City. And about 60%, about 60 developments, or 20% of them, were affected very severely by Hurricane Sandy. The reason is that a lot of our developments are located like Red Hook houses, so close to the water. Coney Island, Far Rockaway, the Lower East Side of Manhattan. Many of NYCHA's developments are right along the FDR Drive, all the way up to 14th Street from the Brooklyn Bridge. And also up near the Triborough Bridge area in Manhattan, and also Astoria houses in Queens, which is right on the East River. So the storm hit us big time and very badly. And what we did immediately after the storm is we, in our Capital Projects Division, have engineers and architects that work in our normal capital program at Housing Authority. So we use our folks to go out and survey the buildings that the Housing Authority owns and get an assessment of what needed to be done. And our first efforts showed that there were 16 developments that had completely lost their power. Every development that we own in Far Rockaway and Coney Island lost power because of the storm. And also the development south of 14th Street, when the Con Edison plant was shut down, lost power. So what we did to respond to that is we reached out across the country for vendors that could supply temporary boilers and generators. There were many different agencies that assisted the Housing Authority, the Army Corps of Engineers, the City of New York. It was a massive effort, and so that got taken care of in it was probably about three and a half weeks after the storm. The buildings were all brought back online, and heat and hot water was being supplied and provided. And as of right now, there are 26 temporary generators located throughout Queens, Brooklyn. There are 5 of them right here at Red Hook houses supplying the heat and hot water for the development. So what we've planned to do is we have hired architect consultants because of the immensity of this task, and the consultants have done assessments and due diligence reports of the condition of our buildings. And what we've done is we've broken them down into 4 categories. And the first category would be like a development that had water infiltration into the electric rooms, but the boilers were not necessarily shut down because of the flood. And those developments we're going to just basically repair in kind. The next category are developments that maybe the electric rooms got flooded, but the boilers took some water in, but the boiler machines themselves did not get knocked out. We will repair those, but because the electric rooms got flooded, we're going to do mitigation measures in those sites. And what the mitigation measures will most probably consist of is floodgates. We have many locations where there are service rooms down ramps, and the water went down the ramp and flooded out the service room. So we need to protect those areas against water intrusion. So we will replace the equipment, and we will protect through these mitigation efforts. That's about probably half of the locations. But the biggest problem that we have are the locations where the boiler rooms were completely flooded. We have many locations that the water went right up to the ceiling. 20-foot high ceilings, 25-foot high ceilings were completely flooded, everything in the boiler room was completely saturated with salt water. And we don't want to put those boilers back in the same location because it could happen again, and that is a very real threat. So we're going to do for two categories. One category is what we're calling Category 3, where we'll rebuild boilers, but we're going to rebuild them in locations that are not in the building itself because they're down in the hole in the basement. We're going to take them outside the building and put new structures to house these boilers. And so it'll involve some modifications to the distribution system of the steam, and that provides the heat and the hot water service in our buildings. And the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to raise the electric distribution rooms. Now, in most of our buildings, like the buildings here at Red Hook houses, they were built in the New Deal era, basically. This was one of the first developments that NYCHA had constructed that was finished construction, I think, in 1940. And the electric rooms, there's no place to put them inside the building that is not susceptible to flood damage. So we're going to take them outside the building. We're going to build appendages to the buildings that will be raised up, and we'll put the electric at a higher elevation. And that'll involve redoing the electric power cables that come into the building and that feed the buildings themselves. But that mitigation effort will give us, it'll give us the resiliency to withstand another flood, and that's what we want. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to put generators, emergency generators, on the buildings that lost the electricity because of the flooding. Many of our buildings had no electric service. Some of the high-rise buildings get the domestic water, the water in the sinks and the toilet bowls, from a tank up on the roof. And that tank gets its water from a pump that's down in the basement of the building, and the pumps got flooded so that the people that were in the apartments had no water at all. They had no water in their sinks or their toilet bowls until we were able to restore the pumps. So we're going to get all those pumps out of the basements of the buildings, put them to higher elevations. The mitigation efforts that we're going to do involve ramps, the entrances to service entrances. We had about 400, I think it was 402 apartments that actually got water in them. They were in 10 different developments, 2 of them in Lower Manhattan, and then none of them here at Red Hook got water in the apartments, but in Coney Island and Far Rockaway, Queens. And we have done several cleanings in those apartments, and we're going to bid a contract to restore the kitchen cabinets that got damaged and replace floor tile to prevent further deterioration in those apartment units. So, I mean, it was a huge effort. One of the other things that we're doing is we have a category of developments that we're calling Category 4 that give us the opportunity to do a little bit more than just rebuild to higher elevations. We're looking into some of the energy alternatives right now with the Housing Authority's Energy Department and some of the utility companies, because there are things that we could do that will save us money in the long run, because the Housing Authority, one of our major expenses is energy, electricity, fuel oil, gas. We spend a great deal of our budget on energy. So we're going to take measures during this rebuilding to make private-public partnerships with utility companies and with utility service providers to get solutions that will save us money in the future on energy. So, that, in a nutshell, that's what the Housing Authority is doing. Our time frame is approximately 1 year to do the repairs in place and mitigation. The long-range solutions that I talked about are going to take from 2 to 3 years at our different sites. Do you have any questions about Housing Authority or what we're doing?
So for the high-rise buildings in Redmond, for example, your estimation would be they're going to be using the temporary boilers
Yeah, the high-rise building here, that's correct. We're going to, this is what we're calling a Category 4 site. This is one of the most severely impacted sites that we had. And we're going to combine the boiler rooms here. Instead of the way they have it now with, I think there's 4 or 5 boiler rooms here, we're going to combine them so that we'll have one boiler room. But we're also going to look to a partnership with private industry to help us provide energy, and also to install cogeneration, because there are techniques now that you can align your boiler with generators that produce electricity, and you can make agreements with the utility company to kind of defray some of the costs of the utilities and, you know, your energy expenses. So that's what we're actively looking into now at this point. Yes, sir.
What are you going to do about those tenants who are living in apartments that are below the flood?
We have, the Housing Authority has a program of reaching out to the residents in those buildings. Mostly they were in Far Rockaway in a development that we call Ocean Bay houses, and also in Coney Island houses and Surfside Gardens in Coney Island. We have no plans to take people out of the apartments. We're going to maintain the apartments after we restore them. One of the things with the Housing Authority is, because of the great housing shortage, we do not take apartments off the rent roll. And, you know, we will do everything that we can to maintain those apartments. You know, and if a building is being built new, you wouldn't put the apartment on the first floor in a flood zone. But those are existing apartments now, and we have no plans to take people out of them. We're going to restore them. There is actually a voluntary move. If people in those buildings want to relocate, the Housing Authority will assist them with that.
In a couple of public housing projects, we have a great deal of open space. And one of the things the SRO pointed out is a lot of this open space actually absorb water and used for managing water, not only to benefit people in public housing but in adjoining areas. Are you looking at any ways of storing water or redesigning the landscapes of public housing in order to protect public housing residents and the adjoining areas?
That's a good question. The question was about use of the Housing Authority's property to absorb rainwater and to prevent accumulation of flooding. I can tell you that we are working in a program with New York City Department of Environmental Protection. There's one location at Hope Gardens in Brooklyn, and we're going to start another project very soon at Edenwald Houses in the Bronx to just look into this aspect where DEP is going to put underground storage in garden areas and grass areas around the Housing Authority's developments. And the idea is that when there's rain, these containers, these below-grade containers that are basically perforated pipes, will act as buffers to absorb the water and to, you know, to help abate the flooding.
Given that approach, don't you think it's ill-advised to sell off public housing property with private developers until those areas are properly studied?
I'm an engineer, and I do research into Hurricane Sandy issues, and that is not my area, sir. I'm not going to comment on that.
Don't worry, we're dealing with that.
Yes, sir.
So, following up what Ron is talking about here, are you looking into resurfacing the parking lots and those areas that are totally concrete and converting them into something more permanent?
We are going to resurface paving that was damaged by the hurricane. There are also a lot of dead trees. The Housing Authority spent a great deal of money removing trees after the storm that were knocked over. What we're starting to see now is that trees that were in the area that was inundated with the salt water are not doing so good. And, you know, if you ride up the FDR Drive, you can see the trees along the drive, and also in Coney Island and Far Rockaway. So It's a continuing effort, and we are trying to deal with all of the aspects of the damage to Hurricane Sandy. But to answer your question, we are going to repave where the paving was damaged. If it wasn't damaged, we're not going to touch it. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned that you're looking into energy alternatives. Are any of them renewable energy sources?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Looking into energy alternatives, are any of them from renewable sources?
What we're looking at right now are what they call power purchase agreements, and there are developers that will come into a site, build a boiler room with a regeneration plant, and you don't have the capital cost. The way that you make an agreement with them is you purchase the power from them. Now that's what we're looking into now. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Don. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. And now, our next presenter is